In the shadows of the Cold War, a silent battle was waged. It was not fought with armies or on traditional battlefields. Instead, it unfolded in the clandestine world of espionage and psychological warfare. The Central Intelligence Agency, America's shield against foreign threats, feared a new kind of weapon. A weapon that could not be seen, could not be heard, could not be detected. A weapon that targeted the human mind itself. The Soviets were rumored to be mastering the art of mind control. They were allegedly developing techniques to break down enemy agents, extract secrets, create unwitting assassins. This was a terrifying prospect, a threat that could undermine the very foundations of American democracy. The fear was palpable within the corridors of power in Washington. What if a captured American pilot could be turned against his own country? What if a diplomat could be programmed to leak classified information without even knowing it? The questions were endless, and the potential consequences were catastrophic. The CIA determined it could not afford to fall behind in this invisible arms race. It needed to understand the limits of human consciousness. It needed to know how to manipulate it, how to control it, and how to defend against it. The agency embarked on a top-secret program, a quest for the ultimate truth about the mind. A quest that would lead them down a very dark path. This search for a truth serum, this search for a mind control agent, was not merely theoretical. It became an urgent, top-priority mission. Codenamed MKULTRA, the project was vast and sprawling. Tendrils reached into universities, hospitals, prisons across the country. Scientists, some unknowingly, conducted experiments on human subjects. They explored hypnosis, sensory deprivation, powerful hallucinogenic drugs. The goal was to find a key that could unlock and control the human will. This sub-project of MKULTRA was given a disturbingly theatrical name, Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA established several brothels, staffed by prostitutes, who were paid to lure unsuspecting men back to specially prepared locations. The brothels were outfitted with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment for the time. Hidden microphones were planted in the walls. Two-way mirrors were installed in the bedrooms. CIA agents sat in a secret observation post with a cocktail in hand, watching, taking notes as the night's events unfolded. The men who were lured to these safehouses came from all walks of life, ordinary citizens seeking a moment of private indulgence. They had no idea they were about to become human guinea pigs in a government experiment. Once inside, the prostitutes would dose their drinks with LSD. The CIA agents behind the glass observed the effects of the hallucinogen. They watched to see if the drug lowered their inhibitions. They listened to see if the men would more readily divulge secrets. Personal, professional. The entire operation was a chilling exercise in manipulation and non-consensual human experimentation. The agents meticulously documented everything. They recorded the subjects' conversations. They noted their psychological reactions to the drug. Did they become paranoid? Compliant? Did they reveal information they would otherwise have protected? The men who stumbled out hours later, confused and disoriented, were collateral damage in the CIA's pursuit of knowledge. This story is not a theory. It is not a conspiracy. It is a documented fact, pieced together from declassified government files, sworn testimony before Congress, and the accounts of those who were involved. Who protects us when the protectors themselves break the rules? The late 1940s and early 1950s were a time of profound and pervasive fear. The world was split in two, cleaved by an iron curtain that separated East from West. The United States and the Soviet Union, former allies against a common foe, now stood as bitter rivals in a new kind of conflict. This was the Cold War, a struggle for global dominance, fought not with open armies, but through proxy wars, espionage, a relentless technological arms race. It was a contest of ideologies, capitalism, communism. Every perceived advance by one side was seen as a grave threat by the other, fueling a cycle of paranoia that permeated every level of government and society. This intense rivalry extended beyond nuclear weapons and space exploration. It delved into the most secret and mysterious territory of all, the human mind. American intelligence officials became convinced that the Soviets were making terrifying breakthroughs in psychological warfare. Reports, some factual and some wildly exaggerated, trickled in about Soviet brainwashing techniques. The public trial of Hungarian Cardinal József Mindszenty in 1949 was a pivotal moment. His dazed, monotone confession to treason seemed unnatural, sparking fears that the communists had developed a way to shatter a person's will and implant new beliefs. The Korean War further intensified these anxieties. American prisoners of war returned home, some of them having signed confessions of engaging in germ warfare or publicly denouncing their own country. The term brainwashing entered the popular lexicon, a terrifying concept that suggested an enemy could turn America's own soldiers into puppets. The CIA, tasked with protecting the nation from all threats, foreign and domestic, felt an immense pressure to not only understand these techniques, but to develop its own versions as a defensive and potentially offensive measure. This created what could be called a brain race, a clandestine parallel to the more public arms race. In the name of national security, a dark door was opened. The CIA was given license to explore the farthest frontiers of behavioral engineering, no matter the human cost. Section 3, the architect of the mind. At the heart of this dark enterprise was a single, brilliant, and ruthless chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb was a man of contradictions. He was folk dancing, goat milking, a family man who lived on a rural farm. Yet he spent his days devising some of the most diabolical tools of espionage imaginable. With a PhD in chemistry, from Caltech, he was recruited into the CIA in 1951. He was known as the Black Sorcerer, the agency's master poisoner, and the chief architect of MKULTRA's most disturbing experiments. His most significant focus was on a newly synthesized and incredibly potent hallucinogen, lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD. He believed it could be the master key he was looking for, a substance that could shatter the ego and leave the mind vulnerable to suggestion. He initiated a massive program to test the drug on unwitting subjects. The agency dosed its own personnel. They administered it to mental patients, prisoners, and drug addicts. People on the margins of society. People who could not fight back or whose testimony would not be believed. It was Gottlieb who conceived of taking the experiments out of the laboratory and into the real world. He needed to see how the drug worked on people who were unprepared, unsuspecting, and going about their normal lives. This line of thinking led directly to the creation of the CIA's safe house experiments. New York, San Francisco. It was Gottlieb's vision and his relentless drive that gave birth to the most infamous sub-project of them all, Operation Midnight Climax. Section 4. The unwitting subjects. The CIA would establish covert brothels in major American cities, New York's Greenwich Village, the Telegraph Hill area of San Francisco. These apartments were rented under fake names and carefully prepared for their secret purpose. They were designed to look like ordinary homes, but they were far from it. The bedrooms were the main stage, each one fitted with a two-way mirror. Behind the mirror, a secret viewing room. To lure subjects, the CIA turned to another marginalized group, prostitutes. Their task: pick up men in local bars and bring them to the safe house. Inside the apartment, the prostitute would be instructed to slip LSD into his drink. After the drug, agents behind the mirror began their work. They had a checklist of behaviors to observe. They listened to every word through hidden microphones. The men targeted were a random cross-section of society: sailors, businessmen, government clerks, tourists, men simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nights of planned intimacy turned into surreal, often terrifying ordeals. They left hours later, minds reeling, memories fragmented, never knowing their moments had been observed and recorded by their own government for a purpose they could never imagine. Section 1. The San Francisco Experiment. They chose a man named George Hunter White to run the new safe house. White was a tough, seasoned federal narcotics agent, a hard-drinking operative who had experience working in the underworld. He rented an apartment at 225 Chestnut Street on Telegraph Hill, a location with sweeping views of the bay. He decorated it with French posters, a picture of a bullfight, and a discreetly placed two-way mirror in the bedroom. Behind the mirror, White and other CIA officers would sit on a portable toilet sipping martinis from a pitcher and watch the surreal scenes unfold. The logs kept by George Hunter White paint a disturbing picture of routine depravity. He documented how some men became wildly paranoid, while others grew talkative and revealed intimate details of their lives and jobs. The experiments were not scientific in any rigorous sense. They were voyeuristic and chaotic. For nearly a decade, this government-funded brothel operated with impunity. The line between protecting the country and preying on its people had been completely erased behind the two-way mirror on Telegraph Hill. Among them was a 43-year-old bacteriologist named Frank Olson. Olson was a respected scientist who worked on developing aerosols to deliver biological weapons. He was a loyal government employee, a husband, and a father of 3. During the second evening at the cabin, Sidney Gottlieb decided to conduct an impromptu experiment. Without warning or consent, he dosed a bottle of Cointreau liqueur with LSD and passed it around to the unsuspecting scientists. Frank Olson drank from the spiked bottle. About 20 minutes later, Gottlieb revealed that they had all been drugged. He became quiet and withdrawn. In the days that followed, he grew increasingly paranoid and anxious. He told his superiors he had made a terrible mistake and wanted to quit his job. The drug appeared to have triggered a severe psychological crisis. They checked into the Statler Hotel on the 10th floor. On the night of November 28, 1953, just 9 days after being drugged, Frank Olson plunged to his death from the window of his hotel room. The official story was that the deeply troubled scientist had committed suicide. The CIA's involvement was completely concealed. The fact that Olson had been drugged with LSD just days earlier was also hidden. The death of Frank Olson sent a shockwave through the highest levels of the CIA. It admitted Olson had been dosed with LSD without his knowledge. It said that likely contributed to his death. The report was damning, but it was buried in classified archives. The public and the Olson family were fed a constructed lie. The official cause remained suicide. The crucial context, non-consensual LSD dosing, was scrubbed. The men who drugged Olson and watched him spiral into psychosis faced no consequences. They were told to be more careful. Instead of hospital care, he was chaperoned by a CIA handler in a hotel room. This was not science. It was reckless endangerment. The blank in the official record around Olson's death symbolizes the whole operation. How many adverse reactions went undocumented? This culture of concealment culminated in a pivotal event in 1973. The outgoing CIA director, Richard Helms, gave a fateful order. He commanded that all files related to Project MKUltra be destroyed. The order was carried out. Thousands of pages were shredded and burned. It was a systematic attempt to wipe the institutional memory clean, to ensure the full story of MKUltra and its victims could never be told. In 1974, a bombshell report by journalist Seymour Hersh in the New York Times exposed illegal domestic spying by the CIA, opening the floodgates of investigation. President Gerald Ford, seeking to control the narrative, created the Rockefeller Commission in 1975. They found references to a deeply classified program involving behavior modification, drug testing. The name appearing in fragments and heavily redacted memos was MKUltra. The Commission's final report, June 1975, was a bombshell. It confirmed, for the first time publicly, Project MKUltra. It brought the story of Frank Olson to national attention. This confirmation was pivotal. A government scientist being drugged by colleagues, then plunging to his death from a New York hotel window, captured the public imagination. The United States Senate formed its own, more independent and powerful investigative body. Chaired by Senator Frank Church of Idaho, the Church Committee began its work in 1975. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that not all the MKUltra records had been destroyed. A clerical error had sent a collection of financial records to the wrong storage facility, saving them from the shredder. These 20,000 pages of documents were a treasure trove for investigators. The ledgers and receipts documented payments to the 80 universities and research institutions that had unknowingly conducted work for the CIA. The committee's investigators were tenacious. They uncovered the sworn testimony of Sidney Gottlieb and George Hunter White. In closed-door hearings, these men described the sordid details of Operation Midnight Climax. Among the trove of surviving documents, one stood out as particularly damning. It was a 1963 report from the CIA's Inspector General. The report was a scathing indictment of the entire project. In the summer of 1975, the Church Committee held a series of televised public hearings. The testimony about Operation Midnight Climax was especially shocking. The immediate consequence was a series of reforms designed to prevent such abuses from ever happening again. President Gerald Ford issued Executive Order 11905, which, for the first time, explicitly outlawed experimentation on human subjects without their informed consent. Sidney Gottlieb, the black sorcerer and architect of MKULTRA, was called to testify before Congress. Due to a deal granting him immunity in exchange for his testimony, he was never prosecuted for his role. He retired peacefully to his farm in Virginia. Similarly, other key figures faced few, if any, legal consequences. The men who designed these experiments largely escaped legal consequences, fading into quiet retirements. Yet the core of the injustice remains. The 1973 destruction of the main MKUltra files by Richard Helms, a permanent void in the historical record. The full number of victims will never be known. In the end, what lingers most from this dark episode are the ghosts. The men who were lured into the safe houses in New York and San Francisco remain faceless and nameless, their identities lost forever to the shredder. We will never know what happened after they stumbled out of the safe houses, their minds reeling from a drug they never knew they had taken. Did any of them take their own lives, their suicides never linked to the government experiment that may have triggered their despair? The CIA's 1963 Inspector General report called findings from these settings essentially useless. Was this sordid enterprise all for nothing? Ultimately, the story leaves us with the ghosts of its victims. Anonymous figures in the background of history, their suffering unrecorded and untold. It is a stark and chilling case study in the abuse of power. It reveals how an agency, created to protect a nation's security, became a perpetrator of profound harm against its own citizens. The agents sat behind two-way mirrors, sipping cocktails while they observed the psychological unraveling of unsuspecting men. In this space, patriotism was twisted into a justification for depravity. This lack of punishment sends a dangerous message that crimes committed in the name of the state may ultimately go unpunished. This history serves as a permanent and necessary warning. It reminds us that secrecy is a corrosive force, and that unchecked power, even when wielded with ostensibly good intentions, inevitably leads to corruption and abuse. The shadow of the state is long, and as Operation Midnight Climax proves, it can fall on anyone at any time when no one is watching. The question from the empty rooms of the CIA's safe houses: who remembers the forgotten? The men targeted were not powerful or important. They were chosen because they were seen as disposable. People whose testimony would not be believed, whose absence would not be noticed. When the state preys on the marginalized and then erases evidence of its crimes, who is left to speak for the victims? The story of Operation Midnight Climax is a somber reminder that the pursuit of security without morality is a path to tyranny, a call to remember those harmed in the shadows, and to remain vigilant when power acts without conscience and without accountability. The scars may be unseen, but they are there, a permanent stain on the nation's soul.